Okay, welcome back everybody. Well, I keep telling you that we do things besides woodworking on this channel, and that sometime we're going to do something on the old car. So we finally got there today. Not a big project. We're just going to put a new thermostat in. We've got this car, as I think I've said before, it was something that we had bought now a few years ago, and we did do a lot of work to it, but changing the thermostat is one of the things we've never done to it. And when it's hot out and you're just idling, whether you're in a parade or something like that, it really wants to heat up to the point where you want to put the heater on even in the middle of summer just to keep that temperature down. So knowing how much rust there was, and the rad was completely rotted out on this car and stuff when we bought it, we probably should have changed it a long time ago, but we didn't. So I'm hoping that that's going to solve our issue. And my son keeps bothering me to show him how to do things on this car. So he's actually going to do the work today, and I'm just going to sit and watch. So we'll get into this. So you need the drain pan?
Yeah, got the drain pan.
Okay, put the drain pan under that corner where that tap was on the rad.
Let's see. I'm just trying to see where it's going to run.
Yeah.
Alright, that's good.
Okay, so we've got a drain pan under it. I made sure the drain pan was cleaned out because the coolant that comes out of this we're going to put back into the engine. So I didn't want any sand or debris that's collected in this drain pan sitting around in the garage. So I've got that cleaned out and we're ready to drain some of the coolant out of this. Loosen the rad cap off so that'll give you your let air in as it's draining fluid out.
Yeah.
Okay, and you can open that tap up. Okay, you probably can't see, well, you might be able to see a little bit down there where the coolant's running out of the tap on the bottom of the rad. And there's cross members and frame rails in the area down here, so you want to be careful how much you're opening this tap, because if it shoots out in a stream and hits those frame rails, it's just going to run across the frame rail and drip all over the floor where you don't want it. So it may take a little longer running slow, but it's going to save a big mess in the garage and on the car both. So we'll let this drain down for a little bit. The thermostat on the old girl is right inside this housing in here. So we don't need to drain the entire cooling system. We just need to get it down to a level that's below this point on the engine block. And we can remove the hoses out of the way, take the housing off, and we'll put a new thermostat in there. Okay, I'm going to pause the video for a bit and we'll let this drain down, because if I open the tap anymore, it is going to start running across the frame rails. So it's going to take a while for it to drain down where we want it to. So I'll pause the video for a bit and then we'll come back. Okay, I think we've got enough coolant drained down now. So grab your screwdriver and we'll get this top rad hose out of your way.
Oh, screwdriver.
That'll do. The little vacuum hose off of the timing advance on the distributor that I just moved out of the way.
Yep. Okay. There. wasn't very tight. That hose is going to be in the way. That's your ratchet. Here.
Just put your finger on the end on the button.
Can't reach. This is ridiculous.
Okay, so we got the last bolt out. There's only 2 bolts in that housing, but we were playing around there with a combination of different size sockets and extensions so that we could fit in this short space down here. We probably could have done it with a wrench. They weren't really tight. I've got a light I've brought in so we hope I can see things better. These were called trouble lights quite often, and most of them were 110 volt that you would plug into a wall receptacle. This one I picked up many years ago, and it's a 12 volt. It's getting harder to find the 12 volt bulbs for them now because it's just a regular, it looks like an ordinary household incandescent bulb, but it's only for 12 volts. And back in the day when I bought it, a lot of my vehicles were prone to break down on the side of the road. So it was nice to have a light that you could just snap onto your battery and have light to do your repairs. Of course, you had to carry your whole toolbox in the trunk also, but that was common practice back in those days. Now this housing should just have fallen off when we took the second bolt out. The fact that it hasn't concerns me that someone may have put some silicone or something on here, maybe to stop a leak they had or something like that. So if you want to bring that rubber mallet over, just give it a light tap. Sometimes they're aluminum housings. There we go. That's all it took to break that loose. Okay, that's just a little bit of coolant running out of the intake. That's fine.
A little.
And yeah, they had, looks like a lot of goop of different stuff on here.
Looks like they put the gasket stuff on it.
Okay, so there is a lot of stuff, if I can get the light there, still that we're going to have to clean off the end of that intake before we attempt to put a new gasket and stuff on here. So I'll pause the video again and we'll get this all cleaned up. And we're just going to use a paint scraper to scrape off the bulk of that. And then if I need to, I'll come back with a razor blade scraper, something that's a little finer, just to make sure it's a nice, clean, flat machine surface there before we attempt putting this back together. We'll do the same thing on the housing side. Yeah, we're going to have to do some cleaning up to get all this old gasket material off of here. The thermostat itself doesn't look like it was corroded in any way or rotted or anything like that. It should just pull out of there.
Pull out?
Yep. Oh, they've got it stuck in good. Okay, so we're going to do some work here to get things cleaned up, and then we'll start some reassembly. So, there's the front of the intake where they had all of their goop. So we've scraped off the bulk of it with a paint scraper, and then we sandpapered it with some light sandpaper. So you don't want to dig at it with a screwdriver or anything like that, because if you put a gouge in that housing, that's a prime location. It's going to give you a leak. And this isn't the original cast iron intake. This is an aluminum Edelbrock intake on here. So it's even easier to gouge it if you were to use something like a screwdriver. The housing part of it, so if I can just set my light down here and get that in. So we've got the face of this all cleaned up now. And you had seen me use a tool that I referred to once before. It was a carbide wheel that was great for stripping paint and rust, that sort of stuff. I had it in one of my previous garden videos where I was cleaning up some gardening tools. So that's the carbide wheel, and in the previous video I had used it on an electric drill for what I was stripping. I just put it on my battery drill this time. I didn't need a lot of speed or anything to clean this up. So we've got our machine surfaces nice and clean again. So we'll go ahead, and the new thermostat, another issue we used to have in the old days was these thermostats, they need to sit in that groove, and holding them in place while you were putting this back onto the engine was always a problem. And we used to end up putting a string through that end of it and up through the housing through here so you could hold it into place just by pulling on a string while you were putting the housing in place. Since then, the manufacturers have gotten smarter, and they've actually made one side of this gasket with adhesive on it now. So you can peel that off, stick that over top of there, and that adhesive is going to hold it all in place for you to make it much easier to reassemble. I'm going to hand that off.
Okay.
So you need to peel the backing off of that thing now.
And poke the holes out for the bolts.
Yep.
Alrighty. Like that there, like that.
We do still have other projects to do on this car, but there's so many other things that just happen to involve woodworking right now that we're trying to do to get done while the weather's nice and everything. I'm not sure when this video will actually air. This channel is fairly new, and I have to say my hat's off to those of you who do YouTube videos and you post a new video every week, sometimes 2 a week, and work a full-time job at the same time. How you keep up with it is astonishing. I just can't find the time to make a video every week to post. So I've actually been making some videos ahead, and so that way I'll have, when I open the channel up, I'll be able to hopefully post one every week, or at the minimum every 2 weeks. So right now it's hot, summertime here. You know, it could be winter by the time I air this video, but that's kind of where things are at. So hats off to the rest of you YouTubers out there who manage to post these things on a regular basis. Phenomenal work. Okay, I think we're ready to do some assembly.
Okay, so put that in there, line it up the bolts. It's been lined up. Now I'm going to put these on. That right in. Okay, stay, please. Thank you. Okay, this one going all the way. I don't know. It's hit.
Is that gasket holding that thermostat in place?
Oh yes, definitely. All right. Well.
Okay.
All right, and the next one.
You just get it started, a couple of threads.
This one doesn't want to stay in the right spot.
Did you put the thermostat in the right way? Is the part that says 190 on it sticking out towards the intake?
The one with the spring and the copper thing sticking out?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I do believe so. Now if I stick this through here, in the hole there. Okay.
Quite often in the back in the 60s and 70s when we were working on these as our daily drivers, this gasket was prone to leaking, so I perfectly understand them having silicone and stuff on it. We're going to try assembling this without putting any extra material on there to begin with, assuming that we've cleaned up the machine surfaces nicely.
Oh.
And that we're going to get a good seal out of it. So we'll try that first. So now my son has opted to try and go with an air ratchet here.
Okay.
I'll move out of your way over to this side. Don't crank it up too tight. Just snug it up. You want to tighten these evenly.
I'm trying to. Hold on. How do I know?
Okay. Go down to the other one.
Oh, I don't know if I can.
Watch the drain pan.
Yep. Now, can Nope. Oh, there. Okay.
Okay, so those are both just snugged up a little bit there with the air ratchet. So now you come back with the manual ratchet and we'll finish tightening these. I don't like using air tools to fully tighten anything. I like the feel of how tight it is by hand.
Oh, that's the wrong way.
Now, once again, I saw a lot of these thermostat housings are aluminum nowadays. This one here appears to still be an original old cast one. But even so, you want to try and tighten each side evenly. You don't want to take the chance on cracking anything. And if it's tightened evenly, then as the engine warms up, everything is going to stay that way. Nothing's going to warp or distort or anything like that. Now the thermostat we took out, there was no visible signs of decay to it or anything like that, but it was marked as a 160 degree Fahrenheit thermostat. which I don't think I can ever recall seeing one that low. I've seen 180s, but never a 160. The one we've bought and put back in here is a 195. So the engine may run a little bit warmer than it used to on the internal temperature gauge on the dash, but at least if it does, we'll know why, that we have a heavier thermostat in it than it had before.
How tight does this need to be?
Let me see what it feels like.
Is that good?
Okay, we're going to call that good. We're going to reassemble the rad hose on it, and we'll put that vacuum advanced hose back on it. We'll get the coolant put back into the rad that we had originally drained out. We'll start it up, work out any air bubbles that might be in the system, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, this way.
Alright, let's leave that there for now. Before we put the last little bit in, we'll get the water pump running, circulate some of that coolant back into the engine block again, and then we'll finish topping it up.
I had it here.
Okay, so we've started it up and we let the water pump circulate the coolant. So the rad went down a little bit. We topped it up, put the rest of our coolant back in, installed the rad cap. So now we're going to wait for it to warm up, see what kind of a temperature we get on the gauge inside, and let it build up some, let it build up some pressure. And we'll see if that causes us any leaks once we get the pressure built up. So there's our aftermarket gauge. Don't worry about the oil pressure sitting at 0, it's not hooked up. These gauges were in the car when we bought it, and they did not have anything other than the water temperature hooked up. So I don't have a wiring diagram to hook up the amp meter, although it's not that difficult. I'm sure I could have figured it out by now, but I just haven't got around to it. The oil pressure requires a sending unit that is matched to that gauge, and it does not look to me like they ever changed the original in the engine. It doesn't have the right wiring connections to hook up that gauge. So someday we may just replace this with another set of gauges ourselves and have all the correct components, and we'll hook it up that way. These are electric gauges. I prefer manual. I've dealt with manual water temperature and oil pressure gauges in the past, and I personally feel better when it's mechanical. I feel like I'm getting a true reading of exactly what's happening with the engine and not some electrical voltage variation or something like that. Maybe it doesn't mean anything, but that's just my personal feeling on it. So we're just passing 150 now. This is going to take a few more minutes yet for it to get up to full operating temperature. So I'm going to pause it here and we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll come back. Okay, so we finished changing our thermostat job. Everything's back together. We let it come up to temperature, and we found one problem was our own mistake. When we were taking it apart, we moved this heater hose up here in front of this alternator bracket to get the sockets in. And in doing so, it was rubbing on this fin here. It's hard to see in the dark on the front of the alternator. And we left the hose sitting there without realizing it, and when we started the engine up and we're letting it run, it was just rubbing the hose enough to chew a small hole through the edge of that hose. There's some light, yeah, so right in this area here. So as this was spinning, it was slowly chewing a hole through the side of the hose. I thought we'd caught it in time, but once it built up pressure, it started spraying up through the hole. So we had to make a quick run to the auto parts store, got a new piece of hose. Yeah, there's where it chewed through the underside of the hose when it was laying on top of that. So quick trip to the auto parts store, new piece of hose, put it back on, started it, let everything warm up, rad cap on, let it build up pressure. We have no leaks on any of the hoses, no leaks on our new gasket in with our thermostat. Temperature gauge is running a little warmer now than it did with the previous thermostat in there. But if that truly was a 160 thermostat that was stamped on it when we took it out, and this is a 190 we've put back in, then we would expect to see that temperature gauge running a little higher. The thermostat should operate when working correctly, so it closes, the engine in the water heats up to the temperature that thermostat has been designed for. While that's happening, you've got coolant in your radiator that is cooling back down by the air passing through it. So when the thermostat opens and lets the hot water back out into the radiator, it's now taking the cooled water back into the engine, and it'll close again and the cycle starts over. So the car, as said, was heating up on us when we were in parades or just idling along at a slow rate of speed. And I suspect if that was a 160, that eventually the whole water in the system got to that temperature, so your thermostat's basically just running wide open all the time, and nothing in the radiator is having a chance to cool down. So now going up to a 190, the water in that engine or coolant, whichever you're running, is going to get to the 190 before it opens, but that gives the product in the radiator a lot longer to cool down, so you're taking cooler water back into the engine. So we'll try it out. Tomorrow we'll take this thing out for a test drive, make sure that everything's going to be all right. We have been asked to put it in a parade next week, so that's why we decided to get this done now. Once again, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned.